Hey, have you heard this? All those stories we see online are just for fun. Lately, I've been hooked on reading these stories about cheating partners and getting back at them. I mean, I like romance stories too, but not when the wife is playing the husband. It's hilarious because I just realized that my wife has been taking advantage of me for the past 7 years, which is how long we've been married. I used to think I did everything for Susan because I was head over heels for her, but now I see that I was just bending over backwards to avoid any fights. It's insane how much I've discovered about myself from reading these stories about wives cheating. I can't believe how oblivious those husbands in the stories were, like they were stuck in the past or something. Looking back, I realized that Susan basically took advantage of me our entire marriage. We actually met in college. I was a senior and she was a sophomore. She was a total babe. It took a few drinks for me to make a move. So, I finally mustered up the guts to go talk to her at this party. I asked her to dance and she said yeah, so we started chatting. I even hit her with that old classic line, "What's a girl like you doing in a place like this?" She laughed. We both had a few too many drinks and she spilled that she had just dumped her boyfriend a few days back and was out for a good time. Her friend had told her about the party, so that's why she was there. We got pretty wasted and things escalated from there. Love in my dorm room. I even put a ball cap on the doorknob so my roommate wouldn't walk in on us. It was actually the first time I ever used the cap. Usually my roommate is the one bringing girls back. I don't remember much about that night, but judging by the messy bed in the morning, we must have had a good time. I even made her breakfast before walking her back to her dorm. I asked if I could see her again, but she said she wasn't ready to start dating again. However, she mentioned that if she saw me at the party she never walked away. Looking back now I realize that was her way of saying she didn't think I was good enough for her. Every now and then I'd see her at other parties, but she'd always stick with her girlfriends and dance with other guys. And who could blame her? She was good looking and available. She did dance with me when I asked, but I wasn't sure if she really liked me or was just being polite. Fast forward a bit, let me tell you, I come from a good family with strong values. The problem was, I didn't exactly fit in. Back in college, I tried to stick to my values, but I definitely hit up a lot of parties and got wasted a bunch of times. Besides Susan, I hooked up with a few other girls during my time there. These girls were pretty easy and would have hooked up with anyone for a good time, if you know what I mean. It was like a way to get some action without having to pay for it. I was feeling pretty down and my roommate, Tony DeMarco, could tell. He's a good-looking Italian dude from New York who came to our college for the scene. Man, that computer science program was legit. We became best buds. Tony was way more outgoing than me and we had each other's backs with our schoolwork. I can honestly say we were like brothers. Tony always made sure I got invited to the parties where I got into some crazy stuff. He knew everyone. That's a true friend right there. Our bond went to a whole new level one day when we were leaving class and Tony slipped on the steps. I quickly got behind him, pulled his head back, and reached into his mouth. I put my fingers behind his tongue and pushed it back to where it should be so he could breathe again. I felt like crying thinking about my best friend getting hurt. Tony opened his eyes and saw me holding his head, my face full of emotions. He asked me what happened and I comforted him, saying, "Don't worry, Tony, you'll be fine, just a little slip of the tongue." We both laughed a bit and he asked me to let him up, saying he was okay. After the medics checked him out. After the doctor said he was all good, we walked back to the building entrance. But then Tony just stopped in his tracks when he saw a fancy limo parked out front, with the driver standing by the back door. Tony went up to the limo and the driver opened the door. Out stepped his dad, Angelo DeMarco, a big guy at 6 feet and 220 pounds, with a grin to match. He gave Tony a big hug, clearly relieved his son was okay. "Dad, this is Mark," Tony introduced me. Angelo DeMarco smiled warmly and said, "I know who he is." He looked at me and said, "Thanks Mark, you saved my son and I owe you big time. If you ever need anything, just give me a shout, okay? Don't forget, I mean it. Anytime." He shook my hand firmly to emphasize his words. 5 minutes later, Tony had already left for New York, leaving me wondering if I really had a true friend. But then during my senior year, I met Susan. After our first meeting, I would see her around campus and she was always nice to me. I started to think maybe she had feelings for me, so I finally got the nerve to ask her out. So, I took her out again and she was down. We went to grab some dinner and catch a movie, and things started getting real between us over the next few weeks. We hooked up a few times, and one time I didn't wrap it up. When I asked Susan if she wanted to hang out again the next week, she said yes, making it official that I was her man. We kept seeing each other, and then Susan hit me with some big news. Mark, I'm pregnant. You're the only guy I've been with. What are we gonna do? I was shocked, but I needed to figure it out. I was raised to always do the right thing, even though I had a feeling that Susan might have been taking advantage of me. I was about to graduate in a month and had a job waiting for me at my dad's insurance office. I had taken business classes to become a licensed insurance agent. Susan, on the other hand, was raised by her grandparents after her parents died in a car crash when she was 12. They had promised to help her with her education, and she wanted to be a legal secretary. Despite supporting a woman's right to choose, I was personally against it. So like when she said she wanted an abortion, I wasn't really feeling it. I suggested we get married instead. I've got a good job lined up for next month, and you can still keep going to school. You can even take a semester off when the baby comes. We can make it work. I love you and want our kid to be legit. I mean, I wasn't totally sure if I loved her, but I wanted to do the right thing. Plus, I didn't really want to pay for an abortion. I had my doubts if she really loved me, but I finally decided to tie the knot, and I wrote to my folks telling them I'll be getting hitched right after I graduate. I mentioned that Susan was preggo, but no worries, we are in love and planning to walk down the aisle soon. I also spilled the beans about my old man's business, which includes insurance, real estate, and auctions. We ain't rolling in dough, but we are doing pretty well. A month after I graduated, Susan and I said I do. We even had Susan's grandparents at the wedding because they are just so darn sweet. Real people who were actually happy for us. They thanked me for doing the right thing by Susan and took a minute to chat with me privately, understanding Susan's stubborn side. You know how she gets mad when things don't go her way. Honestly, I didn't know much about her at first. We met, got wasted, hooked up, and then about 2 months later we started dating. Out of nowhere, she tells me she's pregnant. I started to think she found out about the pregnancy and man, she got spooked and decided to start going out with me, thinking I could fix all her problems. Turns out, she's a real looker with a great personality, but I soon found out she's quite the drama queen. My folks really took a liking to her, and she was always helpful around them. We started off by renting a nice 3-bedroom house with the option to buy it within a year. At first, I thought we were a good match. But after our baby came along, Susan took a short 10-week break from college and transferred to a school nearby that she could easily commute to. And my mom was all over it. Hey, so while Susan was in class, I was looking after our daughter Trina. I actually liked my job in insurance and real estate, and sometimes I'd pitch in at auctions. But let's be real, I wasn't meant to be an auctioneer like my dad and his buddy Bob. I didn't have a ton of experience seeing how married couples interacted, since I only lived with my parents. But one thing I did notice was that my parents seemed closer than Susan and I did. At first, I was the one working while Susan was in school at night, and would just chill at home with Trina. We used to chill and watch TV while Trina was playing on the floor. We were intimate maybe twice a week and it was all good. I always made sure Susan was happy and she never really complained. After Susan graduated, I offered her a job at our company, but she wanted to do billing or be a secretary at a law office instead. She ended up landing a job at a big law firm as a receptionist. I thought the extra money would be nice, but Susan started spending it all on herself. Don't get me wrong, I was making a decent income and taking care of everything for us. Once Susan started getting her paycheck, she suddenly thought she deserved fancy stuff. She wanted a new sports car, then started eyeing our furniture and appliances. I told her I wasn't gonna replace everything, and if she wanted new stuff, she could foot the bill herself. She was stubborn and wouldn't budge, just like her grandparents. I suggested splitting the cost of new furniture and appliances, but honestly, I never saw a dime from her. I didn't even know how much money she was making, and when tax season came, she said her boss told us to file our taxes separately because they were lawyers. Later on, I found out that her boss never actually said that, she just didn't want me to know how much she was earning. She bought all her own clothes and had a closet full of them. Some of her outfits were a bit too sexy for the office, but every time I mentioned it, we'd end up arguing. This all happened about 6 months after she started working. She said she needed a girls' night out, some time for herself. So, every Friday night, she'd go out with her friends. She'd usually be back by midnight, and honestly, I didn't mind at all. I played golf twice a week, so I couldn't really complain. Once golf season was over, I joined a bowling team with some other co-workers from our office. Dance business was our sponsor. This routine pretty much stayed the same until Trina started school. Susan would lay out her clothes the night before, and I always got up with Trina. Me and my ex used to have breakfast together, and I'd drive her to school. I usually picked her up unless I had something else going on, then my mom would take her to her place until one of us could get her. As time went on, me and Susan started drifting apart. It was a slow thing, but I could see it coming. She never really got along with my friends, and she'd be all nice to them in person but talk crap about them behind their backs, calling them geeks, nerds, and other not-so-nice stuff. She had her own friends that she'd hang out with. Whenever Susan's friends came over to chill and play cards, I always had to act like the perfect husband to avoid any drama. Honestly, I wasn't a fan of her friends either, hanging out with them felt like I was back in college. Their conversations always seemed to be about getting close, and their parties were just excuses to drink way too much at someone's house. If I didn't feel like going, it would usually end up in a fight. And sometimes, it seemed like the guys in the group were getting a bit too handsy with Susan. When I brought it up to her, she just brushed it off and laughed. But the truth is, I was always the butt of their jokes during that time. Susan started working late, and Trina and I got super tight. She'd tell me everything that went down at school. I was there every night helping her with homework, and she actually enjoyed studying. I went to parent-teacher conferences and had Trina's back in everything she did. Susan kept treating Trina well at home, always calling her sweet names like honey this and honey that, even though what Trina really wanted was for her mom to be around more often. Whenever Trina mentioned something at school that she wanted her mom to attend, Susan would just say she had to work to help provide for the family. We'd been married for almost 7 years, and I would often find myself going online after putting Trina to bed. I started reading these stories about cheating wives one after another, and it became clear that Susan had been up to similar things for years. Was I just being paranoid, or was Susan really cheating on me? I had no doubt. Man, I found out my wife was cheating on me even though she was good at pretending. I started watching out for signs like her sneaky phone calls. She'd always hang up or change the subject when I walked in. She was always deleting messages and clearing the caller ID. And I noticed she'd wash her clothes the day after hanging out with her friends, especially her undies. There were so many other red flags I read about online, but she never seemed to care about us. Whenever I got back from a party, or if I was out of town for a meeting or business trip, I'd crash at my parents' place. I briefly thought about hiring a private eye to tail her, but then I thought, what's the use? Divorces around here usually end up with a 50-50 split of everything. I even considered getting some spy gear like in the movies, but I knew she was cheating and I couldn't afford it anyways. My main worry was Trina. She's the only reason I stuck around with Susan. Why I know, if we split up, I might not see Trina as much as I'd like. She was everything to me. Susan started hanging out with a friend more, making up any excuse to do so. I joined sometimes, but I never had a good time. It felt like she was showing off to other guys, almost challenging me to react. I felt like nothing I did was good enough and nothing we had was as nice as what her friends had. We still had some closeness, but it was rare, maybe once a month if I was lucky. It seemed like she was doing it on purpose. I felt bad for her, so I stuck around for Trina, but I knew deep down it wasn't the right reason. Then one day, something happened that completely changed everything. I came back from a trip earlier than planned, didn't even call ahead this time. It was night when I got home and saw a weird car in the driveway. I snuck up to the front door, unlocked it quietly, and saw the living room light on but no one there. I could hear noises coming from our bedroom. Well, dang. Are you serious? Susan was in our bed, and she wasn't alone. I wasn't shocked to see Brad with her. Brad runs the gym Susan goes to and has always been flirting with her. But this time, they got caught in the act. One thing to mention is that Brad's wife, Jill, is a model. She does face and hand modeling, and she's definitely good looking. Why would a guy cheat with a 7 when he has a perfect 10 at home? I've known Jill for a while, and she's one of. So, Susan only knows a few people and are walking on them. Susan yells, "What are you doing home? You're supposed to call first. Now that you know, get out so we can get dressed." "Yeah, maybe I'll call Jill and invite her over," I said. Brad threatens, "You tell Jill and I'll kick your ass." I just stood there in the room, and Brad was right, he could probably kick my ass. But at that moment, I didn't see the point in starting a fight. What good would it do? I'd just end up getting beat up. Brad got his ass kicked, and Susan would love that, so I walked out of the room and could hear them whispering, but they had closed the door. Brad came out first, and I warned him about Jill, saying if she found out, he'd end up in the hospital. He didn't say much, just told me to leave his house, so I did. Susan followed me with a confused look on her face. She confessed to me, admitting that she tried to keep her fling with Brad a secret from me, but she knew I would eventually find out. I finally decided to call it quits and told her I was gonna start the divorce papers the next day. I told her to bounce, but she just laughed, saying I couldn't afford it and that I'd regret not having our daughter around. She even had the nerve to ask me what I'd tell our daughter. I fired back, saying I'd tell her the truth, that her mom was cheating and we were splitting up. I thought our daughter could handle it, considering Susan was hardly around half the time anyway. But Susan straight up refused, saying she wasn't going anywhere. She basically told me to man up and kick her out, so I ended up moving into the guest room. I couldn't stand being around her, so I left and went to get Trina. I had to have a heart-to-heart with her and break the news. I wish I could have shielded her from it, but I had to come clean. After picking her up from school, I took her out for pizza and broke the news. It was tough, but I had to tell my daughter Trina that her mom and I were splitting up. She kinda already knew and even asked me about it. So, if we were gonna split up, I straight up told her that me and her mom couldn't hack it together anymore. And guess what? Trina tells me she already knew her mom was cheating on me. She'd known for a while but didn't spill the beans 'cause she cared about me and didn't want me to get hurt. She thought if I didn't find out, it wouldn't mess with me. Pretty smart for a 7-year-old, huh? Trina then spilled the beans on how she found out about her mom's cheating. She caught her mom with Uncle Joe a few months back, then with Warren from the grocery store. Trina also noticed her mom getting too cozy with her friends at parties. She was upset that I would eventually find out about all these flings. I wish I didn't have to know about this so soon. It's crazy that my own daughter knew about her mom's affairs but didn't tell me to spare my feelings. I was hesitant to ask her about it, but I had to know. So Trina found out her mom was messing around with Uncle Joe, but turns out he wasn't even a real uncle. Trina just called him that 'cause her mom told her to out of respect. I was like, "Hey, sweetie, you sure your mom never did anything shady when you were around?" And Trina was like, "Nah, Dad, you were out of town and I was at my friend's place. I came home to grab my bike and heard some weird noises in the house. I peeked in and saw Uncle Joe on top of Mom. I knew what was up, so I just left quietly." "Trina, do you promise?" "Yeah, Daddy. I heard those same noises when you and Mom were together, but you always kept the door closed. Mom never knew I was there and I was too scared to tell you. I knew it would hurt you." "What about Warren? What did you see?" "I overheard Mom talking to him on the phone. She mentioned his name and told him I would be going to Grandma's later. While I was packing my overnight bag just before we left, he walked in. He kissed Mom and she didn't realize I saw them. She told him to wait until later. After I left the bedroom, he just gave me a smile, thanked my mom, and left. The next morning, when Grandma dropped me off, he was still hanging around acting like he forgot something. Despite my age, I'm not clueless. I didn't know if I should be mad or just grin. When she said what she said, it hit me that Susan and I were done, and I didn't give a damn about what would happen next. When we got back home, Trina barely talked to her mom, only answering questions if she was asked. Stayed quiet the next morning. I took Trina to school and then went to see JN, my lawyer. He said Susan was right, our stuff would be split 50-50ths. But he had some tricks up his sleeve that Susan didn't know about. I asked John to speed up the hearing so I could kick Susan out of the house. I didn't want to be under the same roof as her. On my way back, I swung by my mom's and asked if Trina could crash there for a bit. I told her me and Susan were splitting up. I wanted to protect Trina from the drama. Mom said she could stay as long as she needed to, and I promised to visit her every evening. But when I got home, Susan hit me with her demands. She wanted everything she could get, plus a lot of child support. She even mentioned alimony, which seemed ridiculous to me. I figured she hadn't told her lawyer everything. I didn't say anything to her, just went to bed. The next day, my lawyer John told me. So, when I got home on Monday, Susan starts giving me shit about how dumb I am for accusing her of cheating just because I got some legal papers at work. I wanted to tell her off so bad, but I knew I had to stay cool if I wanted to win custody of Trina. So, I kept my mouth shut and focused on the hearing coming up on Monday. Me and Trina went to the judge's office together because I had picked her up from school. Susan had her lawyer with her, and my lawyer John met us there too. Susan asked why Trina was there, and I said she's involved in this divorce and should have a say in where she lives. Kids should be with their mom, I argued. Susan said we'll let the judge decide, so we all went into the judge's office. He explained that this was just a hearing, not a final divorce decision. Figuring out who gets what and where you'll live will be in your divorce papers if everyone agrees. If not, I'll make temporary decisions until the trial where all the evidence will be presented. The judge asked Trina to wait in the lobby for a bit so he could talk to her. She quietly left the room. The judge commented that she seemed like a well-behaved girl. Susan almost smirked and said, "Thank you, Judge. I've done my best." I couldn't help but think she could have been an actress. I kept my mouth shut, not wanting to argue. Susan's lawyer gave the judge her papers asking for custody of Trina, $115 a week for child support, and an extra $100 a week for alimony. She also wanted the house and all its stuff, even though she knew she could only get half its value. The judge looked over her papers and mentioned that this was a no-fault divorce state where things are usually split evenly. Susan gave me another one of her looks. That smirk on her face, thinking she was gonna come out on top in the divorce hearing. The judge asked me why I wanted an early hearing, and I straight up told him it was cause my wife Susan was out there cheating. I made it clear I didn't want our daughter Trina to see any of that mess. Susan then started yelling, saying I had no proof and daring me to show any photos, texts, or videos. The judge had to tell her to chill out and then asked me if I had any evidence to back up what I was saying. So, my daughter Trina saw Susan cheating on 2 occasions, and when I brought it up, Susan straight up denied it, accusing me of lying and dragging our daughter into it. Her reaction and slip-up didn't escape notice, but her lawyer told her to chill out. The judge then had a chat with Trina in the hallway for about 10 minutes, and when he came back, he believed Trina and was ready to grill Susan some more. But Susan butted in, claiming I had coached Trina. Trina didn't know what to say and denied doing anything wrong. Then the judge asked Susan about her relationship with a family friend called Uncle Joe. He wanted to know how Trina knew about a tattoo on Joe's body. Susan was surprised and said Trina wasn't there and didn't know about the tattoo. She said Trina would have told her if she had seen it. I jumped in and said that Trina had seen Susan with Joe when she came home to get her bike. I also brought up Trina's run-in with Warren. So, there was this other guy Susan was seeing, which just goes to show how often she was not around. The judge had to figure out how Trina was supposed to deal with all this. In the end, the judge decided to give me custody of our daughter, but my wife would still get to visit. He also said our house and stuff had to be split evenly. My lawyer John broke down the numbers for the house. It was worth $120,000, but we still owed $70,000 on the mortgage, so the net value was $50,000. The judge also had the contents valued at. Susan was like, "Hold up, I spent my own money on that furniture and car, they are worth more than you think." But the judge was like, "Look, in a divorce nobody gets rich. I'm giving you the house and all the stuff in it, but you gotta cough up $30,000 to Susan. And y'all can keep your own cars. If you can't agree on something, we are selling it all at auction and splitting the cash after we pay off debts." The judge also pointed out the lack of something. I was able to keep most of our money after Susan complained about how unfair it was, especially with the furniture she bought. The judge explained that since we didn't have a prenup, we had to split everything equally. I got to keep the house because I had custody of Trina, and the judge said it was important for her stability. Then the judge asked if I could come up with $30,000 to pay Susan. I said I could borrow it from my parents since banks wouldn't give us any money while we were getting divorced. So, the judge finally made a decision and said that since me and Susan make about the same amount of money, she has to pay me $1,150 a week for child support. And neither of us gets any alimony. We have 3 days to get out of the house and only take our stuff. Susan was not happy about having to pay me, but the judge said we can fight it if we want to. Mr. Royer's evidence is pretty solid, though. Just enough to make sure I get custody and split up the stuff. It's probably gonna hold up. I went out to the lobby and gave Trina a hug. I could tell she was really upset about her mom, but we'll get through it together. Susan was really mad about the judge's ruling. She thought about fighting it, but her lawyer told her not to bother since her chances of winning were low. My dad did loan me the money to pay Susan back. Every week when the court sent me Susan's money, I just handed it over to my dad. That's how things were going. Finally, I was making enough to get by on my own, and with Susan gone, I even had some money saved up. Life was starting to look up, except for Susan constantly bothering me. Trina told me that when she was with her mom on weekends, she was always being asked about me. Trina said her mom even apologized for what she saw. Maybe Susan did have some respect for Trina, or maybe she was just pretending to be a good mom. After a few months, Susan started making excuses for not being able to take Trina. It was always something like working late or... So basically, she was going on business trips, and apparently she was working as a secret assistant for some lawyers. She never told me much about it, but I had a feeling she was doing more than just office work. As long as she kept it away from Trina, I didn't really care. Then one day, my dad called me into his office and I was surprised to see an old friend, Samantha, who we always called Sam. Sam used to live with us as a foster child when I was 12 and she was 14. Her parents got busted for dealing drugs and ended up in jail. My parents had to sell our house and stuff at an auction, and that's when they met Sam. She was supposed to go to a foster home, but my mom insisted on taking her in. Most people foster younger kids, but my parents saw something special in Sam. She stayed with us until she graduated and joined the military. I really liked her and missed her when she left for the service. Even though I never said it, I loved her like an older sister. I was pretty smart and helped Sam with her homework. To me, she was like family. So, she came back home for a bit, but I was off at college when it happened. It had been like 10 years since I last saw her, and she was looking good. She gave me a big hug, and my dad mentioned that he hired her as our new receptionist. She said she used to be in some kind of combat in her younger days, but lately she's been mostly working overseas on computer and electronic stuff. Having Sam's cheerful face around in the mornings during my divorce was a nice change. It's funny how Susan and Sam never got along. So, ever since they first met, Sam told me she likes to, observe people, and she didn't think Susan could be trusted. "Mark, I really care about you and I don't want to control your life, but I wouldn't trust her," Sam warned. I also had my suspicions about Susan. I heard rumors that she was still dating other people even when we were separated. It didn't help my reputation, but I had to stay calm to make sure I didn't lose custody of Trina. Dad invited Trina and me over for a barbecue to welcome Sam. Once we got back home, I introduced Trina to Sam and they hit it off. It looked like they had both made a new friend. Susan would always come over to the house, saying she forgot something, but I knew she was really just checking up on me. I couldn't wait for the divorce to be finalized so I wouldn't have to let Susan into the house anymore. For now, I was just biding my time. When Trina wasn't around, Susan would tease me about her lovers. She just couldn't let it go. I knew I shouldn't let it bother me, but it did. Finally, the day of our. After the divorce, I moved on and started spending a lot of time with Trina, who became my everything. I should mention that right after Trina was born, I secretly got a DNA test done to confirm she was really my daughter. I never told Susan about it. But there was a darker side to my life. I knew about Joe Warren and Brad, but I suspected there were even more guys I didn't know about. Deep down, I wanted revenge, but I had no clue how to go about it. Every time I saw one of those guys, they would taunt me. I knew it. Man, that had to be so awkward for Trina, but she never mentioned it. I knew I had to come up with a way to get revenge on them, but I wasn't sure how. I saw Sam every day at work, and she had become a real ray of sunshine in my life. Our friendship had really blossomed since my divorce was finalized. One day, I brought my daughter Trina to the office, where we ran into Sam. After chatting for a bit, Trina suggested that Sam come with us to see a movie. I jokingly said that Sam might have other plans, but she just smiled and said she was free and actually loved pizza. So, me, Trina, and Sam were watching some animated movies, and it seemed like Trina and Sam were already on the same page. I said we would pick up Sam later, and we had a blast at the movies. On the way back, I suggested we should hang out like that again. Trina was super excited and invited Sam over the next night to watch superhero movies and make popcorn. I was about to back out, but Sam eagerly accepted. I was happy with how things were going, but I didn't want to mess up our friendship by catching feelings. Sam and I were just pals, you know. Hey, come over for a movie night at my place. Trina passed out, and then Sam asked me what I was thinking about. I told Sam that I wish I had a superpower to deal with the jerks who messed up my marriage. Sam told me to forget about the past and focus on the good stuff in my life, like my daughter, job, and home. But I just couldn't let go of the anger towards those who hurt me, and I kept daydreaming about getting revenge with a superpower. Sam got into it too and asked me what kind of superpower I would want. I don't know, maybe the power to make things right. Hey, so like, don't sweat the bad stuff, man. How about focusing on some good vibes? I actually have positive thoughts too, like wanting to kiss and hang out with you. I admitted it even though I knew it wasn't gonna happen. Some thoughts I had to keep to myself. Later, as Sam was leaving, she thanked me for inviting her over and said she had a great time. She asked me to give Trina a kiss for her. I hugged her and walked her to the door. The next morning, after getting Trina ready for school, I dropped her off and headed to my office. As I stepped out, so I was chilling in my car when all of a sudden, lightning struck real close. It didn't hit me, but it knocked me on my ass and I smacked my head on the car. Next thing I know, I wake up in the hospital with Sam by my side. I asked Sam what went down cause all I remembered was seeing lightning before blacking out. Sam told me I had fallen and hit my head, ending up with a concussion. The docs did an MRI and said I would be okay, but I had to stay overnight for observation. I was worried about my daughter Trina, so I asked about her. So Sam was like, don't worry, I'll pick up Trina from school and bring her to see you. She even offered to let Trina stay over if I was cool with it. I told her I trust her completely, but I was feeling weird from the concussion. Sam was like, duh, you hit your head, of course it feels weird. The doc said you'll be back to normal in a few days. Anyways, I gotta get back to work. Take care and listen to the doc, all right? Sam said, leaning in for a hug. Give me a kiss on the lips. It was more than just a peck and it felt so nice. Oh, I forgot to tell you, an old college friend of yours came by the office this morning. She gave me another quick kiss and then left. I couldn't help but wonder if I have some kind of superpower since she kissed me. After thinking about it, I also wondered who this college friend could be. Eventually, I fell asleep and was woken up by none other than my old college buddy Tony DeMarco. He said he had some business to take care of. So, my buddy from Ohio popped in to catch up with me. We talked about the old days and I thanked him for helping me score. We had a good laugh and he asked about Susan. I spilled the beans about her cheating in our divorce, but made sure to mention that I at least got a beautiful daughter out of it. He mentioned he has 3 kids and is happily married. Before he left, he reminded me to hit him up if I ever need anything. But then I couldn't help but think about Warren and how he was making fun of me just 2 days ago. So this dude was all up in my face bragging to his friends about hooking up with my ex, and man, it really pissed me off. I was already plotting my revenge when Sam came over. I couldn't resist leaning in for another kiss from her, and she gave it to me. But then she looked me dead in the eyes and dropped a bombshell. She said, "Mark, there's something I gotta tell you. It's super personal, but I think you need to know." She told Trina to wait outside for a minute. "I haven't been completely honest with you," she confessed. "I think it's time I come clean." I told her she didn't have to spill the beans, but she insisted. "Yeah, I'm worried about it. Just let me finish." She was really set on it before she got out of the service. I spent 2 months in a psych ward. I wasn't totally out there, but I did something and it's been bothering me. I didn't want her to keep going, but she insisted. There was a group of us at a bar and the guys were getting way too drunk. They started grabbing at me, and even though I told them to stop, they wouldn't. I ended up grabbing a beer bottle, and the next thing I knew, the cops were arresting me and taking me to the psych ward where I spent those 2 months. 4 months the other soldiers were covering for me, saying it was just all in good fun, like some kind of syndrome. I just wanted to come clean and tell you the truth about my past, Mark. I'm really sorry for keeping it from you. You deserve better. I thanked her for opening up to me, but couldn't help but wonder if I somehow influenced her to be honest with me. It was a weird power to have, but I knew I had to be careful with it. After Sam left, I thought about her, Tony, and Warren as I fell asleep. The next morning, Trina woke me up from my nap. "Yo, Sam. Guess what? You're coming home today." Trina shouted excitedly. "Sam and I are gonna take you out for breakfast at McDonald's. It's not my top pick for grub, but the company is gonna be awesome." Later on, when I got back home, I was reading the paper and saw an article that caught my attention. It said that Warren, the dude from the grocery store, was found frozen in the walk-in freezer. Apparently, the door got stuck and he froze to death. They don't think anyone did anything shady, just a freak accident. Then, my dad called me. So, to make sure I was all right, he was out of town and couldn't come to the hospital when I was there. After telling him everything was cool, he told me to stop by the grocery store where Warren, the guy who died, used to work. Turns out, Warren had insurance with our company. As I was filling out the forms, some people were giving me weird looks, maybe because they knew Warren was always talking about hooking up with my ex. They might have been thinking I had something to do with his accident. Last week, with Sam's help, I was able to nail all my appointments. Before walking into each house, I was hoping they'd pick our insurance. I even closed 2 deals during that time. It was a really good week for me, my dad, and Sam. Everything was going well until I ran into Brad. I had an appointment to list a house in real estate, but when I got there, nobody answered the door. After a few minutes and another ring of the doorbell, a fancy lady finally showed up. I introduced myself as Mark Royer. "Hey, I'm here to sign your real estate papers. I also brought the sign for your yard." She said sorry for being late and asked if she could sign the papers now and put the sign in the yard. She said we can take the outside picture now, but she needs to clean up a bit before taking interior shots. I said no problem, I'll send someone tomorrow for the rest of the pictures. As I was taking some exterior photos, I saw a car parked across the street that I recognized. So basically, Brad came by my place again, and it looked like he was chilling with Mrs. Das, who Sam said is getting a divorce and wants to sell her house. I couldn't help but think maybe Brad had something to do with her divorce, especially since he's also messing around with Jill and Susan. I was so curious that I ended up calling Susan, partly to make sure she'd take care of Trina for the weekend, but mostly to spill the tea about seeing Brad. I mean, it was just his car that I saw, but it was enough for me to start thinking things. A few days later, they found Brad dead. Apparently, he had a freak accident while lifting weights. The bus slipped because the weights were too heavy. The cops were looking into it, and even though they came by to ask me some questions, I had a solid alibi. I was with Trina at her school, where she was in a play. Unfortunately, her mom couldn't make it. It made me wonder if my thoughts somehow had an effect on what happened. I really hope Jill wasn't involved. She deserved better than what she got. The police kept the case open and hadn't ruled out homicide, even though it seemed unlikely. Maybe it was an accident, but my sales were doing great and life with Trina was amazing. Sam was starting to become a bigger part of our lives. Trina always wanted Sam to come with us when we went out, and I was starting to have mixed feelings. Was I subconsciously making Trina have feelings for Sam? Was Sam wanting to join us because of my thoughts? Honestly, I didn't like this. I wanted the three of us to be together because we all genuinely wanted it. I had to go check out a new housing development because of some weird reason. There were a bunch of construction companies there, and I needed to sort out liability insurance for the developers. I had to go to each construction firm and make sure all the insurance paperwork was done. And of course, I had to run into the company Joe Akers worked for, the same guy my ex was seen with. He laughed at me as I walked by, not realizing how much that hurt. I decided to confront him when I was by myself, and the way he looked when I left was priceless. He probably saw the news about the deaths and heard about my divorce. One day my buddy Tony gave me a call saying he was gonna be in town and suggested we grab some lunch. We caught up and talked about the good old days. Tony invited me to New York for a vacation and asked if I was seeing anyone. I brought up the woman I was interested in, but made it clear that it wasn't anything too serious. I told him about Sam and he thought it sounded pretty serious. He then suggested I asked Sam if she would. Hey, wanna come with us on a trip to New York with my daughter? I called Sam and asked her to join us on a vacation to New York. Tony invited us and said he would give us a tour of the city. She said yes right away, but I couldn't help but wonder if it was my suggestion or if she genuinely wanted to go. I dropped Trina off at my parents' house after signing some papers. On my way back to town, I got into a car accident. So, 1 minute I'm chilling in the hospital with Sam and my dad, and then I wake up confused as hell. I asked what went down, remembering a car crash and wondering how long I was out cold. My dad tells me I was in a coma for 3 days, and during that time, him, Sam, and my mom took turns keeping watch over me. I was worried about my daughter Trina, so I asked how she was doing. Sam reassured me that she was good, but she was more worried about me. They decided it was best for Trina to stay with my mom and not come to the hospital to visit me. Me, knocked out cold, they were gonna come see me that afternoon. I had a feeling they weren't telling me everything, so I called them out on it. Turns out, my old man spilled the beans that Joe Akers, a guy we knew, was found dead the same night as my car wreck. Cops thought I had something to do with it at first, but once they realized I was in a coma, they dropped me as a suspect. I wanted to know more, so my dad filled me in on how he had seen Joe at a construction site just a few days before. The cops thought I did it at first, Sam kept going, telling us how Joe's truck went up in flames right outside Susan's place. The report said Joe was seeing Susan and it happened as he was leaving her place in his truck after a few drinks. I looked at Sam and she knew what I was thinking. All I could imagine was getting in a wreck. Sam and Dad took off but said they'd be back later with Trina. Mum brought Trina to see me, and seeing them both made me feel better. I was feeling really good when I asked about Sam, and my mom said she was busy getting caught up on my stuff. She can handle everything except signing legal papers. My mom noticed that I had a thing for Sam, saying it was obvious whenever Sam was around. I felt a little awkward and said sorry. My mom said Sam is a great person and pointed out that she's a foster child in our family, not my actual sister, so it's fine for me to have romantic feelings for her. Then Trina jumped into the conversation. Talking about how much she likes Sam, she said Sam is so nice and treats her better than her own mom. Trina thinks Sam might have feelings for me too. I asked her why she thinks that, and Trina said it's just the way Sam acts around me and how she always hangs out with us when I invite her. The doctor said I could leave after lunch. Mom called Dad at work and told him she and Trina would stay with me and give me a ride home. So, Sam came over to chill and watch a movie with Trina and me. She made us some popcorn and we all kicked it on the couch like usual. Trina passed out, so Sam carried her to bed and tucked her in. When she came back, I noticed I was blinking a lot. Sam asked if my eyes were cool and if I needed to see a doc, bringing up my recent concussion. I told her I thought I lost my superpowers after I tried to use them in the hospital. When she asked what I tried to do, I told her I tried to make the hospital staff do something. Grab me a stick, Sam asked when she walked into the room. I was feeling kinda embarrassed, but I confessed that I was trying to see if I could get her to kiss me. We locked eyes and I wasn't sure what she was thinking. Then Sam told me that if I wanted a kiss, I should have just asked. She opened up to me, saying she had been waiting for me and caring for me ever since she got back to town. She shared her past with me and even kissed me in the hospital, but I never gave anything back. I told her I thought she kissed me because I wanted it. I told her I want her to like me for me, not just because I have powers. Sam then asked if I really don't have any powers anymore. I confirmed that my powers are completely gone. Then she suggested we go to the bedroom and have sex. I was totally up for it. The next morning, I showered right away. Sam smiled at me as she joined me in the shower. Afterwards, we sat at the table drinking coffee when Trina walked in. "Good morning, Daddy." "Good morning, Sam." She asked if Sam spent the night here. It was a bit awkward, but Sam just straight up said, "Yeah, I did." I was too pooped to go home. It was funny, but Trina didn't press for more info. She just grabbed a bowl, poured some cereal, and started chowing down on breakfast during our ride to work. I opened up to Sam about my emotions, telling her I loved her and that I was actually glad to lose whatever control I had. I just didn't know how to handle it. Most importantly, I wanted to make sure that when she said she loved me, it was genuine and not because of any power. So, Sam leaned out of the car, gave me a kiss, and said, "Mark, I really love you and I'll do whatever it takes to make you happy and keep us together." The day was going great until I heard my wife Susan demanding to see me in the reception area. She walked right past Sam and stormed into my office, slamming the door behind her. Susan accused me of being the reason her past lovers died and threatened to have me arrested. I denied any involvement, mentioning my cooperation with the police and my hospitalizations during 2 of the deaths, one of which put me in a coma. So, I was telling her that she can't keep blaming me for stuff, you know. I straight up told her to get out of my office and said I'd call security if she didn't leave. I kinda regret getting married to her, but the only good thing that came out of it was our daughter, Trina. I hinted that if I actually wanted someone dead, it would be her. After she stormed out, I overheard her arguing with Sam in the lobby. Surprisingly, Sam was handling it like a boss. He warned her to stay away from me and mentioned some stuff she had done. "Susan, check this out." Sam handed Susan a manila envelope filled with pics of her hanging out with different dudes. Susan was like, "What the hell, Sam? Where did you get these?" Turns out, they were left on her desk, showing her with her exes right before they kicked the bucket. Susan got spooked and asked who took the pics and if Sam knew who of her boyfriends. She was ready to call the cops, but Sam warned her to think twice, hinting that she might be like a Black Widow spider, involved in their deaths. "Hey, you were the last one to see her boyfriends alive before they died. If you don't watch it, I'll tell the cops you gave me those pictures," Susan shot back. She also said she was wearing gloves and would deny ever seeing the photos. I told Susan that the pictures were left on my desk one morning and I didn't know any of the guys in them. Sam then warned Susan to steer clear of me and quit making accusations. She mentioned that I didn't know about Susan's other flings, like her new beau Larry. When Susan asked how Sam knew about Larry, Sam didn't spill the beans on how, but she made it clear that her knowledge was crucial. She advised Susan and Larry to get the heck out of town, maybe switch to a different office in her law firm for their own well-being. Worried about her daughter Trina, Susan asked Sam about her. Sam reassured her that she could still see Trina whenever she wanted, praising my kindness and making plans for visits during holidays. Susan then guessed that Sam had feelings for me and wanted her out of the way. Sam confirmed it. Love for both me and Susan. I told Susan to just move on and live her life without any drama after she left. I went to the lobby and asked Sam about their fight. Sam brushed it off as just girl talk, saying she told Susan to leave me alone and even hinted that she should move to a nearby city. I didn't ask for more details, thinking that if things went as Sam suggested, I'd be cool with it. The next week, Susan called me and said she had a shot at a promotion but gotta leave next week, all the way to the other side of the state. She wanted to see Trina, so I made sure they met before she left. Sam and I tied the knot a month later. Trina was pumped, almost as much as me. Mom and Dad were over the moon, happy we found each other. Our honeymoon was in New York, where Tony and his wife hooked us up at their fancy mansion and gave us a tour of the city. Trina tagged along during the day and crashed at Tony's kids' place at night while we had a blast. The last thing Tony said to me before we left the club was, "Don't forget, if you ever need me, just give me a call." Trina does go see her mom a couple times a year. We haven't had any more issues with Susan and we still get her check every month. As for Susan's lovers who died, their deaths are still a mystery.